Welcome to 2024 from the Fire Protection Podcast. This is episode 56. We're gonna be doing a lot more in 2024, trying to come up with a couple episodes a month, or even more than that. Um, yeah, it's really exciting. Some of the guests and topics I have lined up for the first half of the year. So, yeah, please stay tuned and follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, the fireprotectionpodcast.com, obviously inspectpoint.com as well. So, yes, episode 56, Dyne Fire Protection Labs is on the podcast. Grant Lobdell and Joan Leedy were on, talking about their testing lab for sprinkler heads, for foam, for antifreeze, and even dry chem. Obviously, sprinkler head testing is really big in NFPA 25, along with antifreeze and foam. And obviously foam the last few years with all the stuff going on with PFOS and PFOA. But yeah, sprinkler head testing, they have a great product there. So they're talking about the nuances of that and kind of best practices. So great to have them on talking about NFPA 25 and everything else. So on to the podcast, and yeah, make sure to like and subscribe. Well, welcome Grant and Joan to the Fire Protection Podcast. I'm in lovely Ocean right now. Virtual background in my office. So yeah, thanks for joining today.
You're welcome. It's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Where are you guys located again?
We are in a suburb of St. Paul, Minnesota. So I have the blizzard behind me because it's already snowing here.
That's why we're talking about dry heads and antifreeze today, getting ready for winter.
Mm-hmm.
No, actually, it's a really nice day here today. It's probably going to be about close to 80, so it's good.
I guess give each of you, given, whoever wants to start, give an intro of who you are, what Dyne Fire Protection's about, and kind of what you're doing in the market now.
Well, I will start because I'm the founder of Dyne. My background is chemical engineer, and I started at 3M and ended up in the foam lab or fire protection with aqueous film forming foam. And 3M used to test samples, and a sample would come in and we'd all scramble because they'd kind of come in, not that often, and try to get the testing done. So I always had this idea that it could be done better and quicker with like a kit and make it easy. We actually got samples in baby bottles once.
Oh, wow.
And I picture this guy at Exxon running around trying to find samples to put his foam in and going, honey, can I use the baby bottles?
Make sure they're disinfected, right?
Right. So anyway, I always had that idea. And then through work and kids, I ended up leaving 3M. And about 4 years after that, started Dyne. So we, started testing mostly firefighting foam to start with. And we did this pretty cool kit where you send it out with bottles and prepaid shipping. And we did 1 week turnaround, which no one had done before. And we just found, I don't think we took business away from people. I think we just made it easy for people to meet the code.
Right.
Because the only companies that were testing foam at the time were other foam manufacturers.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they weren't doing that great a job at it. They've, of course, copied my kits now, and they do kits too. But yeah, so that's kind of my background.
Nice.
Yeah.
Grant, what about you?
Well, I started at Dyne right out of college. My background's in chemistry, and I started as a lab technician. And at the time, we were doing firefighting foam. And then I helped add sprinkler testing and all the other testing we do now today, and just kind of climbed the ladder as I went. So again, started as a technician, and I managed the laboratory for a time, the GM, and now the president. So that's kind of my back. It's all been at Dyne, my whole experience here. It's been great. Been, this fire protection industry. Had no idea I was going to get into it straight out of college, but I've enjoyed it quite a bit. Always learning.
you don't even know what fire protection is when unless you're going for fire protection, I feel like, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. In college, like, I had no idea what firefighting foam is when I started here. I just knew I like chemistry. I like the lab environment. I like testing. Applied for this position, and Joan was gracious enough to hire me. And yeah, we went from there.
So I know Dyne gets into obviously foam and we'll get into other aspects that I want to kind of definitely cover. But what else does Dyne do?
So yeah, firefighting foam was our start.
Mhm.
And along the way, we added antifreeze solutions. So inside of these sprinkler systems, one way you can add some freeze protection to them is with antifreeze. There are other ways, but if you do use antifreeze solution, NFPA would have requirements on that. You're going to annually, before the onset of freezing weather, you're going to get that tested.
Right.
You can check it in the field if you have the appropriate equipment. But if you don't want that liability, you don't have the equipment, keep it calibrated, you could utilize our service for that. We can also help with this changing antifreeze landscape now with these listed products coming to market and being required. We can even differentiate those listed products from what we refer to as legacy products, just your back in the day, your propylene glycol glycerin mixtures.
Yep.
So we added that, and then comes along, and a lot of this is customer driven, where again, they're looking at the standards and they're seeing, okay, this standard, I'm following NFPA 25, I get to a line that says I need a laboratory to do this part. I need to send it to a lab to test this. And they'll see that and they'll reach out to us and, hey, can you do this? And that's kind of how sprinklers came about. We were aware of it for a time. But then the demand became there. Hey, we really need help fulfilling this. The contractor needs help getting this done. Can you do this? So then we added the sprinkler testing.
Nice.
So, and then there's a couple odds and ends. I don't know if we'll get into today, but there's dry chemicals, and there's a couple other things we can do as well. But those are the main ones that we focus on here at Dyne currently.
Yeah, a lot of most NFPA 25, I feel like some of the testing, we'll get into the different kind of verticals inside that, and then if we get time, I'd love to hit the dry chem too, because I am interested in that. But obviously big topic, and this is, Joan, where you kind of started your career, is the firefighting foam. And obviously it's crazy when you see your local state representative on, when you're coming up on the ballot in November. I think it was last October, or the local state representative, and it was just like one of the 5 to 10 topics they were looking at is regulating firefighting foam, and it said it right in a state representative, getting ready for election. Obviously, you see it there. There's stuff going on in firefighting foam industry. So, I guess has that business like exploded with all of the PFAS stuff going on, PFAS stuff going on? I know there's PFAS and PFOA, and it's all under one realm.
Well, the market's definitely changing. I am chair of NFPA 11, and
Oh, wow.
that was a 5-year cycle. So we'd rewrite the standard every 5 years because there wasn't really a lot going on. And we've gone to a 2-year cycle because of all the changes and the synthetic fluorine-free foams. NFPA 11's kind of coined SFFF. I don't know if that'll stick because there's a lot of different terms right now. But currently, in the current edition of NFPA 11, the new foams are referred to as synthetic fluorine-free foams, or SFFFs. So there's a lot going on there. Honestly, here at Dyne, we haven't seen a lot of fluorine-free foams yet. In my opinion, there was just recently, I think even within the last week, the first mil-spec approved fluorine-free foam. And I think that's kind of going to get the ball rolling because, it's not just a UL listed or a factory mutual approved. This is a military government, and this is a pretty hefty testing that goes on with the military to get it on the qualified products list.
Sure.
And you're seeing the military, I think I don't know if you know the exact date, Grant, but they've already said they're not going to use any fluorinated foams after like 2025, I think. So, you know, that's coming up fast.
Yeah, that's a wide variety of whether it's an aircraft hangar, right, or whether it's a just firefighting, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
what manufacturer was that? Like the actual like a the pan test, like the 10 by 10 pan test? Is that what they did? I guess how did they pass that, or do you know any
Well,
else?
the manufacturers have to submit samples and it's pretty intensive. There are even tests with materials, so long-term aging studies with different metals. They test the plastic 5-gallon pail by
Oh
dropping
wow,
it. You know, there's drop tests. There are obviously extinguishment tests. There's aging tests where they store the material for a given amount of time at a high temperature and then they test it again. They test expansions, drain times. So it's a pretty hefty standard. I don't know how many pages, but it is on the internet. If anybody's interested, you just look up mil spec. I don't know the number. The old one was um, I can't even remember that anymore. But anyway, if you just look up fluorine free foam mil spec specification, it is published.
gotcha. Okay, yeah, I'll maybe I can find something out there. Do you know what manufacturer passed the mil spec? Was it Perimeter?
Yes, they've advertised it. There might be others,
Okay,
but they're the only ones I've noticed so far. I think they posted on LinkedIn. So
nice. Yeah, I
mm.
actually just Googled it and a sponsored ad came up. So obviously they're on top of it. Um, so,
I
you know, with
understand there were about 5 or 6 that were being tested. So I would
gotcha.
assume there'll be others as well, or
They'll
maybe
all
I
pass.
just haven't noticed those. I don't know if they're really the only one.
So when you're getting a foam sample from, obviously you have the automatic extinguishing equipment or firefighting, right? But then, well, the firefighting at, you know, for it, so there's the firefighting foam, but then there's like the fixed foam protection. Are you getting both of those samples to do testing on? And I guess what are you testing? Just the concentration? What else are you testing in there?
Well, what NFPA now 25, it used to be in NFPA 11, but they moved that to 25. They require that you test the proportioning. So there you're actually running the equipment in the field and you are making sure that it's proportioning at the right concentration. So if it's a 3% foam, NFPA says it has to test between 3 and 3.9.
Okay.
That most of the time is done in the field. We do offer a service where you could send in the concentrate, you could send in a water sample, and you could send in the solution. And we can determine that in the lab, but that also can be done in the field. And if it's done in the field, they can make adjustments right there.
Sure.
So that's one part of the testing. The other is you're supposed to send in a sample of the concentrate to a laboratory or manufacturer or, you know, in a facility approved by the AHJ. And it just says quality condition testing. The tests that we run are a series of tests on the concentrate itself, things like viscosity and pH and density. What we're looking for there is, was it diluted prior to,
Right.
you know, accidentally diluted, say, or
Yep.
was it mixed with something that it shouldn't have been mixed with? Viscosity is important because that's what determines proportioning. And some of
Yep.
these foams can get thicker as they age. So that's a key property. pH can kind of tell you whether there's some chemical reactions going on. Most foams are pretty neutral pH. So if they're very basic or very acidic, you know that maybe there's something going on here that might ultimately affect it. Then what we do is we mix the product with water at its nominal concentration and mix it. And we run expansions and drain times. With film forming foams, we've been making sure they do form a film,
Hmm.
but that would only be with the AFFFs or the
Sure.
products that have fluorochemical in them.
Yep.
You know, we'll test and make sure there's positive spreading coefficient. In my opinion, with these fluorine-free foams, the way they extinguish a fire is strictly with the foam and the expansion. There's no film.
Yep.
So you really have to make sure that that product is still foaming sufficiently for it to work well. So it's going to be really key going forward to test these, because it's not like you have two chances. You know, you can either foam a film or you can do a foam.
Right.
You only have this foaming quality. So that's going to be really important going forward.
So with all these states that are, taking out the, the AFFFs and putting in, requiring synthetic foams out there, it sounds like the codes, and this could be 25 and some of the others may evolve where kind of like sprinkler heads where you have to test them X amount of years. Since that fire blanket's not there anymore on those synthetic foams, you have to ensure that that they're going to put out the fire. So it sounds like potentially in the code they're going to have to be tested X amount of years, every X amount of years, right?
That's always been the case. And it is in the code now that they must be tested at least annually.
Okay.
So
Well, I mean offsite. And right now you have to get the concentration test, right,
Oh,
through a refractometer,
yeah.
right? But how do they know in the field that it's gonna create a blanket? Or maybe I'm
Well,
misunderstanding.
both of those tests have to be done annually. It
Okay, so
does
they have to be
say
sent to
that-
you annually as well.
Right.
Okay.
And, I think, Drew, the way that started was because there was protein foam, and protein foams, again, had maybe a 5 or 8 year shelf life. So you wanted to test them annually so that you didn't fall off that hill, and that they weren't working. So the codes go way back, and I believe that's why they were tested annually. Fluorinated foams had much better shelf lives,
Right.
even 20, 30 years sometimes. But they've always said foam should be tested annually.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. All right. So it is being sent off. So I thought it was just refractometer test for some reason. That's my bad.
No, it's the whole thing. So again, what we do is we send a reminder and let people know, it's been 11 months and it's time to test again. The one change that has occurred in the industry with the fluorinated foams is people are using different ways of measuring the concentration in the field because they don't want to discharge all this fluorinated foams.
Right.
So there are like pseudo foams, or they're using a water substitution method. And those are even approved now to be done in the field, because a lot of states, they still allow you to use fluorinated foams, but they don't allow you to test or train with fluorinated foams.
Right. You can't discharge it.
Yeah.
And if you discharge it, you got to incinerate it.
Correct. Collect it. And there's even questions on incineration. So.
Oh, really? Wow, man. I remember doing a test. My buddy was doing a test down in New York City in Brooklyn, all the new the diesel fuel up stations for all the boats. And I'm like, they better find out a good place to test this. And they did, and they had an incinerator on site that they pumped it right into. But I was just like, oh man, this is an accident waiting to happen here. But they did a good job with the test rig and all that. And how do you do that annually? Safely and environmentally safely too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot with foam. I mean, it's and just PFAS in general, right? With 3M just got, obviously you probably still know people at 3M and that crazy litigation settlement the other day or a couple weeks ago, and it's just like, wow, all right, this is serious.
Yeah. So.
Grant, so all right, let's transition from foam. Obviously annual testing for NFPA 25. You guys sent out some really cool ways to get that off and back to you. I think obviously most people, that if they're not doing foam, they're definitely doing sprinkler heads if they're doing NFPA 25. So what do you see most often? Obviously the kind of codes dictate that, but what different type of sprinkler heads do you guys test there?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. It's all sorts of types. the frequency differs based on both your environment, the age of the sprinkler, the type of sprinkler you have. So our foam, and Joan's gone through, is annually. Sprinklers vary. If you're in a harsh environment, you're somewhere very corrosive, and you're concerned about the sprinkler performance, you're going to probably do that every 5 or 10 years if you have a listed corrosion resistant sprinkler. So it's not every year, it's every 5 or 10 years. But you get something like the office space above me, pretty, conditioned office space here. I just have an ordinary standard sprinkler. That's going to be after 50 years. So we have a pretty good track record. It's a tried and true technology. We can go 50 years before that first initial test. So come to be 50 years old, the building owner needs to decide, well, am I going to replace all the sprinklers, or am I going to take 4 or 1%, whichever is greater, of the area down and send it off to be tested?
Right.
Now, if I had quick response sprinklers, maybe that's after 25 years. It's a newer technology. And I'll touch on just briefly I'm saying these intervals. Some people may be listening and going, that's not what my standard says. They may be several editions behind, right? These states are not up to the most current edition. It takes a while for them to adopt them. So like dry sprinklers, for instance, over the last couple editions have moved from 10 years to 15 to 20. Now, if I look at the current 2023 edition, we are all the way up to 20. And we often get asked why that is. Why do we keep moving them? Well, one, I mean, we're on the committee, they're not trying to make difficult for you just to make it difficult. It would be nice if we only had one interval. And what happens is the dry sprinklers in particular, for a long time, they had a notoriously high failure rate due to the O-ring issues. I'm sure many listening are familiar with all the issues with O-rings, and, they haven't been listed. It's probably 15, maybe going on 20 years now, but they're still out there. We still get some in through the lab here, and they have a notoriously high failure rate. We're talking 50 to 70%.
Wow.
And, they're going to send 4 or 1%. They're going to send a couple sprinklers. The chances are I have a failure in that group of O-rings is extremely high.
Yeah.
But we are now starting to kind of weed through all those. So as we've weeded through them with the dry sprinklers, okay, now we feel pretty good. The failure rate on dry sprinklers is pretty low. It's under 5%, maybe 2 or 3%. Okay, the committee decided, let's bump it up to 15. Let's bump it up to 20. Again, I think the goal is, now this is my interpretation, my opinion, but I think the goal is to have less intervals. If we could just go, if it's a harsh environment, 5, if it's quick or dry, 25, if it's standard, 50, that'd be a lot easier than all these different intervals.
Yeah.
So that is one that has increased. Same thing with quick response. Used to be 20 years, now 25. We have the data to show between us and the other laboratories to show, hey, the failure rate is pretty low. We can now extend that initial test. Again, we're not here to try to take your money. We're here to try to make sure these buildings are safe both for people and for property. If the failure rate, if they never fail, there's no reason to test them, or there's reason to push that interval back. So getting into the different types of sprinklers, we see them all. I mean, even though the interval is not as frequent as foam, it's all over the place right now. There are just so many buildings with sprinklers and so many different types of sprinklers. ESFR are pretty prevalent too, those big sprinklers. And those have a 20-year interval currently. So we see it all. Dry sprinklers ranging from a couple inches to several feet. You know, the dry sprinkler barrel, depending on the temperature you need to protect against, how much length you need. We get them all. We can handle it all.
Also, like those dries, they're so, I don't want to say fragile, because they're steel. They're steel. I have worked for both Viking and Tyco, so I know very well on dry sprinklers on kind of how they're made. But I feel like if you're shipping that, and maybe this gets into the shipping package that you potentially send out, like I think there's the ability to, you know, if they're just tossed on a truck, you know, for UPS or FedEx, right? They could get bumped and really throw off your test.
Yeah, so we always say we can test sprinkler in just about any condition we receive it in. Now, that's not to say you should send it in any condition. You know, if you got one just corroded to, you know, you can't see the sprinkler through all the corrosion. You may not want to, you may just want to replace that. But the one thing I can't test if it's already broken. If it's broken in transit, the bulb or the link is broken, there's nothing I can do, because my test is to measure the sensitivity, you know, how quick does that bulb go off? And then the functionality part of that being, does the waterway also clear? But if that happened in transit, there's nothing I can do. Which getting to you, the kits, that's why part of the reason we provide these kits, one, we want to make it easy. The easier it is to do, the more likely it's going to be done. But it's also protected. So the standard kit we had has a lot of foam padding. You're going to put your sprinklers in there. Dry sprinklers. Now you brought up shipping. That's the one caveat we always got to say for dry sprinklers. We don't include the shipping on those because they are so big and bulky.
Right.
But we do provide, if you need it, we provide a container, a vessel that telescopes out, fits your sprinkler. It's got foam on both ends, so
okay.
we'll protect it. Yeah, we want to avoid, we get that all the time, where just sprinklers thrown in a box. And that's very frustrating for the customer, right? Of, okay, I sent all these sprinklers, where are my results? But we can't test them. They've already broken, and having to resample them. So utilize that shipping boxes that we provide to protect those sprinklers and get them here in one piece.
Yeah, no, that's key. Comment or I guess question on, so NFPA 25 is gathering data. Are you guys volunteering data to the committee to make decisions on these frequencies?
Yes, if they ask for it, yeah, we will certainly
That's
help
awesome.
provide that. Yeah, us and the other laboratories. Yeah. Yep. So again, the failure rate, if they want to know, again, well, okay, how are we doing on this type of sprinkler? Dry sprinklers, for example, they can ask for that. We can also, anyone in the public can get participated in the NFPA process. You can go to nfpa.org and submit a public comment.
Right.
We've also done that, where in the industry, if we see something trending that way, we can submit a comment as Dyne, get it in front of the committee to discuss. Yeah, those failure rates on those intervals are key. Again, I don't think, again, my opinion, having intervals all over the place, it's hard to remember, right? And especially when we're on different editions and we're changing them, that's not the goal. We do want to try to get to a place where it's, it's a lot less, more compact, if you will,
Right.
easier to digest. But
Yeah.
the failure rates dictate that. It's how long can we go before we're not very confident in this product.
Well, and it takes a long time to cycle out some of those older designed heads and get through all the testing of that. If it's, annual
Yep.
test. And also, I think everybody over, NFPA 25 is taking a longer to kind of get fully adopted everywhere too. So it's some of that. Is there any, I work for two of the top sprinkler manufacturers. Is there any type of sprinkler head, newer technology, older technology that you're seeing more failures in? Obviously you had the O-rings out there. Is there anything newer out there that you're starting to see some trends?
No, not necessarily. And I don't want to, point out any particular one, but not necessarily. O-ring being the most prevalent. I mean, nothing comes close to that. I mean, and that's why there were those voluntary recalls. I mean, 50 to 70% is extremely high. And you got to keep in mind too, everything we do is after it's been installed for a number of years.
Right.
So even if I see a trend, is it just because that sprinkler, that type is more likely to end up in this environment, and that environment's truly the cause?
Right.
And even though NFPA 25, before you sample sprinklers, you're supposed to do that floor level inspection.
Yep.
And replace anything that fails it. So if I see a sprinkler and I already know that's detrimental corrosion, it's going to fail, you should just replace it right then. You should only be sampling from what remains.
Yep.
Everything that passes that, then test it. But we still get that. Again, I will test it in any condition it's received. So again, if I would, my opinion, it's detrimental, but they give it to us, we'll still put it through the test. And it fails, that ends up as a failure statistic. It shouldn't have been. I mean, there's those debates where everything that we get, maybe some of those should have been caught by the floor level inspection. But we also keep in mind that we understand some contractors tell the building owner, they tell them, hey, this needs to be replaced. This is detrimental corrosion. And the building owner will reply, no, you get a laboratory. I want proof. I want that report that says it fails. So they begrudgingly, okay, I'll send it, I'll get it tested, even though we know it really should be replaced at that point. They want that piece of evidence, that piece of paper that says, yes, this does indeed fail. This is detrimental.
Yep. No, that makes sense. Yeah, I just, there's some newer design heads, like some of the institutional heads, which a lot of times it's the environment. And I just remember work and trying to sell to some of the bigger facilities on the institutional side. And it's tough to get those heads in, right? Because they have to fit like the testing laboratory for the prisons or the hospitals or wherever they're in.
Yep.
And they were just really tough to install. And I remember there was a lot of failures when they first came out, and then they kind of worked everything out. But
that's a case with a lot of things and that's why the NFPA has these like quick response. Why is that not 50 years? Pretty good track record so far. It
Right.
just hasn't been around as long. So we kind
Yeah.
of, but yeah, they work out the kinks. And I can say good things like the Bellevue spring design on the water seal. We talked about the O-ring being really bad. The Bellevue spring, it's a washer that's raised in the middle, gives it
Yeah.
a little extra push. Those have been great. Very good. There's very little contact on the side where corrosion could kind of fuse it up. It gives that extra spring. So I can talk about good things that, we've learned over the years and that I've seen these designs work very well.
What about the Viking came up with the flap style sprinkler, right? Where
Yeah, I
opens
haven't
up
seen
not you haven't seen those
myself,
yet?
haven't seen maybe, how new of a technology
They're
is it?
probably 5 years. 5 years.
So again, we probably wouldn't see them unless there's some sort of, legal investigation where somebody had to pull
Corrosion.
one for that.
Or
Or it's
corrosive
in a
environment.
Yeah, exactly. That's the only reason we'd see those. So it's still, again, so new. And keep that in mind too. Yeah, our failure statistics are, designs, a lot of them that are 10, 20, 50 years old that
Right.
we're getting back. So we're kind of delayed. If someone comes out with something today, I don't have anything quite yet. And even if I did, even if they took them down, it's only a couple of years old.
Yeah, you're not going to
It
get
lasts that for 5 or 10.
the data.
Yep.
Have you seen any dry flexible sprinklers yet?
I haven't. No, I know they're out there. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
seen 4-foot, steel pipe, but no, I haven't gotten the flexible ones. It won't be a
Interesting.
problem as testing goes.
Right.
We're just testing the sensitivity of the bulb and that water seal goes. But yeah, that will be interesting. I'm awaiting yet the first ones to come through.
I think they're 7 years old at this point, so it'll probably be, probably another 5 to 10 years, which is kind of like, all right, I feel like the newer technology you get, you should want some data on that. And then all of a sudden you're going to, I don't think you're going to run into this, but then you run into the O-ring thing, right? And then it's just like, boom, you got these recalls happening. And it's just like,
and they put them, as part of the listing test. There's some
Right.
aging studies, some corrosion, 30 days, I believe. I mean, there are some studies I'm sure they've done, but yeah, as far as infield, haven't seen too many myself.
nice. Yeah, it's you probably see a lot of interesting stuff coming in from the field, sure.
So anything older than 1920 for the code, you're supposed to replace, but we still get some in.
Do you really?
Oh yeah. We get a couple, from the early 1900s. Yep.
You probably have a nice, what do you do with them when you're done?
Well, most of them, the metal, so just a standard, a lot of it's brass, we'll just recycle the metal. So once it's activated, right, the bulb's gone, it's shattered, everything, it's just a steel frame or the brass frame. Recycle that. Same thing with dry. Most of that's just steel, so it's not worth too much, but we'll recycle it. But there are a few that we'll save. We have a display in the office here. Now, we call it the wall of shame. Mostly what we display is what you don't want to do. We'll get ones that are just corroded like crazy. A hornet's nest attached to the top of deflectors.
Right.
We've seen all sorts of things. So those are most of the ones we save. But yeah, there's some unique old ones that we'll definitely save and put on display.
I throw them on eBay, and
there's collectors that have reached out.
Collectors out there, yeah.
Oh
it's
yeah,
kind of funny.
Yeah. But most of the time we recycle that metal.
No, that's cool. Yeah, I'm always interested to see how the code has kind of morphed in the different years. I had a feeling the laboratories were sending in the data, and that's how it was tweaking. But the technical committee's not just, they're looking at the data, but there's also different interests on there. Like, all right, is this gonna, there's owners on there, there's insurers on there, and there's a wide variety. Actually, I'm gonna be at some point rolling on to NFPA 25 as an alternate here soon.
There you go.
It's a tough one to get on, but
yes, it is. Yeah, yes, it is. Congratulations.
Yeah. So kind of step into another topic in 25 is antifreeze, and obviously that's been a probably over the last 15 years. I think I was working for Tyco at the time when a couple of those fires happened with the glycol mix. How is that business morphed over the last few years with the new listed antifreezes?
Quite a bit, just as much as it's morphed in the standards. Yeah, I think 2009, somewhere around there. Yeah, we had the incident where a highly concentrated and highly pressurized system went off. So antifreeze, if you take, a lot of them are propylene glycol or glycerin these days. I mean, that is a flammable liquid.
Yep.
And to make it worse, we put it under pressure. So it kind of atomizes, makes very small droplets, very flammable. So if you were just take antifreeze and that's the first thing coming out of your sprinkler, it is going to fuel the fire.
Yep.
So when that happened, the issues, the industry decided, okay, we need some more regulation on this. For starters, let's just say it has to be factory premixed. The belief being that if we're mixing this in the field, there's the potential that it can separate out into pockets.
I got a funny story for you one time.
Yeah, go ahead. I'd love to hear it. No, I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
So I'm in I never name names, but I'm rolling into a contractor's office, and I go to the back, and there's literally a guy. There's two 55-gallon drums right there, and he's just got I think he might have a CPVC stick or something, and he's just mixing, and I'm like, what is he doing? And I go inside, and he's like, yeah, he's mixing up the antifreeze for some of the projects we got going on. And this is prior to everything happening.
Oh yeah.
But it was a guy just mixing water and glycol.
That's how it was done. And it's not the easiest to get into solution. It takes some effort, but they were able to customize. I need this % for this amount of freeze protection.
Yeah.
When that all occurred, they thought, let's just take that variable out. We want it mixed by the manufacturer, thinking that let's ensure it's mixed and it's going to stay
right.
stable.
Right.
Because again, if it separates out, you might have pockets of just really high concentrated antifreeze. So that was the first big change, factory premix. Again, all of this is something you can check in the field with refractometers or a hydrometer, something in the field, you can check it, but you could utilize us as well. But then they always said in there after that, okay, we have a sunset date of September 30th, 2022. At that point, we want to use listed antifreeze. And listed just meaning, okay, a third party has come in, has evaluated, done a series of tests. They'll check the corrosion on it. Again, how stable it is it going to stay in solution? We're going to use that. And as we know, with this podcast, we're past that sunset date of September.
Oh yeah, almost a year. Yeah.
2022. Right. So, the 2023 edition says one thing and most states are on another thing. So they're behind yet. So if you're following anything prior to this current 2023 edition, it says after this date, you should use listed antifreeze solution.
Right.
But if you're following the current edition, which I'd always recommend, reference the most current, it says when it needs to be replaced, then you have to do listed antifreeze solution. So if you have a legacy installed and it still passes and you don't have to drain it for whatever reason, it can remain in there for the current edition.
Right.
But as soon as you got to drain it for some reason, even if it's still good, but you had to drain the system for some other reason, you are expected at that point to use listed product. From our standpoint, it shined from testing, it shined a spotlight on the issue and the need to test. So there was definitely some increase there. And then lately there's been a need for, as you may know, the records aren't always the greatest in this section. So they're understanding, okay, what do I have? I have this liquid. Is it the legacy? What is it? Propylene glycol, or is it a listed product? And that's where we've had interest and we can help them. Okay, I can't tell you what's in it. Some of those are considered trade secrets, but I can determine, is it that product or not? We have the ability to check for some of these additives and whatnot in the solution.
Interesting. Okay.
We can give a thumbs up or thumbs down. Again, I can't tell you what specifically is in it, but I can tell you whether or not it is one of the listed products or not. And then, there are requirements. Listed is pretty simple. You got to follow the manufacturers. It's got a refractive or density, make sure it's within that tolerance. If you're still on the legacy, same thing. We're going to look at refractive and density and see where it's at. But you got to keep in mind too, we may have a product that, it's a good product. It meets the refractive and density, but it may not provide the freeze protection you need. It may still be valid. It's not too concentrated, but let's say it only provides you down to 10 degrees. You need to go all the way down to a 5,
right.
Okay. Then even though it's still acceptable per NFPA, it may not be acceptable for your situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know the listed ones have some trouble getting down to the lower temperatures, and
there's some limitations, and more have come. You mentioned Tyco. I think they had the first one. Now I think there might be up to 4 different products. Tyco's got 2, Lubrizol, Noble. Yeah, they've all been able to now. It took a while. I mean, the reason they put that date almost 10 years, down the road to 2022 was they needed time to develop these products to meet these tests. One, they had to develop the tests. Again, like you said, you had a guy literally mixing it up. All of a sudden we're going, okay, what tests do we want to do to ensure this is going to work? So they had to come up with the test. And then the manufacturer had to take the product, and try to meet those tests. And then no, it doesn't. Okay, what do we got to add and what do we got to finagle here to make it pass these tests? So it took a while, but it was last minute, but there are products out there that hopefully, listed could get you. But yeah, there are limitations both in temperature and size and use.
So if you're on an edition of NFPA 25 prior to 2023, which is,
Yes.
by the way, the entire country.
Yes.
Nobody's on
No.
the newer standard, even
Nope.
though we're in 2023. And they're probably not even going to make their way there until probably 3 to 5 more years, which is the craziest.
Most are on 2017, 2020.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm on 2020, not too many yet. So how do you recommend, I guess, a fire protection service contractor, inspection contractor, whatever? So if it says, hey, it's got to be listed by this date, do you recommend just automatically getting that analyzed by you guys just to say if it's listed or not, if they're not sure?
Well, I would check their records, and that's what the standard says. If you do have records of when it was installed and
Right.
you trust them, you trust no one switched it out in between there and what it is. But yeah, if you don't know, you're going to need a laboratory at that point. If you don't know at all, you just checking the refractive is not going to be enough to tell you, because you can have propylene glycol glycerin. They're all going to give you a refractive to differentiate it. But yeah, if they don't know, you're going to figure that out. You could use a laboratory like ourselves. But then if you're on a previous edition and it's not listed, I mean, I believe there is a clause in a lot of these NFPA that you can reference the most current information. If something comes out all of a sudden and okay, this supersedes that, you should reference the most up-to-date information. But I always recommend just speak with your AHJ. Okay, I know we're on the 2017. It says after this date you need listed.
Right.
But let's look at the current. They've made this grandfather clause in there where I can leave this in until it needs to be replaced.
Right.
And have the AHJ decide that is what I would recommend. You know what I mean? But I would certainly bring that to them. Unless, again, the building owner really does want to switch. At some point, they will have to switch. It's just delaying the inevitable. If they have legacy, as soon as it needs to be drained, they're going to have to switch. But if they really do want to delay it, make the AHJ aware of it. They're probably already aware of it. But that out of the foam and sprinklers we've talked about, Antifreeze has had a lot of change, probably the most change over the last couple editions in 25.
Yeah. Obviously bringing in the new listed products and stuff like that.
Yep.
Oh, cool. That's good stuff to kind of learn about. So I guess might as well hit it. I got both of you here. Joan, so you guys do obviously the foam side and the chemical side, and that's where you started some of the sprinkler stuff. But you said you guys get into some of the dry chemical testing, I guess, and what codes are referenced there. I guess tell me a little bit more about that, because that's kind of new to me.
Well, that's a service we offer. We have a kit for that as well. That's kind of our MO, is to have those kits and make it easy. There is an international maritime organization, or IMO specification, that does require that dry chemical on ships be tested. Is that annually, Grant? I guess I don't. Okay.
Every 2 years, I believe.
Every 2 years. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And so what we're testing for there is moisture is the main one. And then we also do a test just to confirm the particular dry chemical.
Oh, make sure it's, all of one.
Yeah, like if it's ABC, it's your mono ammonium phosphate is typically your ingredient in there. So we'll look for that. Typically it's anywhere 70 to 90, depends on the product.
Yep.
But yeah, we can tell you, do you have, again, an ABC? Do you have a BC extinguisher, purple K?
Interesting. Yeah, I know, and that's big. And obviously NFPA 10 has that. And
correct. And 17 would be your fixed systems, but 10 being your portables. And those where IMO 1432 that Joan's talking about, it specifically mentions, having it laboratory tested. And NFPA 10 and 17, they're more vague. They just say to examine it. Some people choose, again, visual examination is what they choose to do. I'm not, gonna sway one way or the other, but I think we got a great service. But they don't, in those NFPA documents for dry chemical, they don't specifically call out, send it to a laboratory to have it analyzed.
That'd be kind of nuts with all the extinguishers out there, and how
Right.
do you do that at scale? And
Yeah. How do you efficiently grab a sample, get results back before you recharge it? Yeah, it would be quite the logistic nightmare.
yeah, and yeah, I've seen some fire extinguisher, charging stations or recharging stations, and I think they're doing most of them are doing a pretty good job making sure the moisture content's right, obviously, and
Mhm.
they're not mixing different uh
Different
chemicals.
types.
Yeah, types.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
You
Oh,
know,
that's cool.
a lot of this gets back to knowing what you have. I mean, even in foam, there's a lot of different types of foams. There's foams for alcohol, for, water soluble versus water insoluble solvents. So, Drew, you with your software could solve this problem, because when people buy foam, they should be documenting what type of foam they bought, when they bought it, what lot it was even. And it just gives you the whole picture then. So when you do testing, you know what you're doing too.
Yep.
And with dry chemical as well. But unfortunately, sometimes that's not the case. You throw some foam in a tank and then you throw some other foam in the tank and you realize that those two are incompatible.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Incompatible chemically, but also incompatible for the equipment that they're going through.
right,
'Cause
right.
it's listed
Well,
with the equipment.
there's actually a freeze protected foam that has ethylene glycol in it, which is water soluble polar solvent.
Mhm.
And if you put alcohol resistant foam in with that, you cause the polymer to drop out of solution, plug up your whole system.
Oh, no way.
I mean, that's just one example of how not knowing what you have and adding something to it. I don't think that happens very often because alcohol resistant foam or freeze protected foam is not all that common, but there is a case where you could have a nightmare just by mixing these foams.
Yeah, it could happen.
So-
I know there's a variety of different contractors and fire protection professionals I've talked to. They're like, if we're not currently doing the inspection or service on this account, I'm not even touching foam. There's too much. And they're in one of the states that is kind of going after it, more than others. So it's like, all right, they're not even gonna go after it. They're like, hey, I can shift my business elsewhere, and I don't even have to worry about it, right? Which is kind of scary, right? That they don't even want the business because of the litigation around it.
The scary part is, I mean, that system's still sitting out there. Someone needs to make sure
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, because hopefully you never need it. But if you do, you're going to want it to work, right? I mean, that's what these tests are trying to help get that, hey, hopefully it just sits and you never need it. But when it trips, we're going to hope it works.
Yep. Hope it works. This has been great. Yeah, and our software, like Joan, back to your comment, we track a lot of that data, concentration levels over years and what is there. So there's a lot of value. Obviously, I think we have value to the NFPA side of things too, to see what data is needed and how frequencies change, what should be tested. So I think unfortunately, the code cycles don't happen quicker and things take time to adopt. But I think we're getting to a certain point where some of this data is obviously you've provided that on the sprinkler testing side and have changed that around. So I think that's kind of one of the first steps to kind of refining it, because a lot of what 25 was is just picking stuff out of the air and not having on some of the frequency stuff, and putting the data to that, I think is very powerful.
Yeah, they just kind of, I mean, they obviously make an educated guess where to start a new technology at, but typically it'll be on the conservative side. And then the data will tell us, okay, I'm not having any failures. We can push that interval back, or, oh no, I'm having a lot of issues. We gotta increase this. We gotta catch them sooner.
Yep. Cool. So at the end of every podcast, I do this thing called the quick response round, which is kind of fun. So I'll ask both of you guys a question and try to make it quick, and we'll kind of wrap the podcast up. It's kind of funny we're talking about quick response sprinklers today. So Joan, on I don't know if this is a quick question, but what are your thoughts overall with 3M getting out of the Novec business?
Well, Novec is technically a PFAS.
Yep.
But it does not, I emphasize, it does not have the issues that AFFF has.
Right.
I think it's going to be a public relations for the fire protection industry to make senators, representatives realize that all PFAS are not created equal. Firefighting foam gets into water sources and people drink it. That's the biggest problem.
Yep.
And Novec 1230 is discharged into a room. It evaporates and the environment destroys it.
Yep.
It's kind of a magical chemical, but it is a PFAS. So it's a good question.
Yeah, hitting us with the tough ones at the end.
Yeah.
Well,
now
I got yeah.
the other point is, I mean, 3M got out of Novec 1230 because of a public relations. It's not because the product's bad, but they have a policy to not manufacture any PFAS, no matter what. And they're using PFAS. They have to use it to make products and do some things like that, but they don't want to be a manufacturer. They have a lot of business to protect.
Yep.
So it's interesting what'll happen. But my opinion is you're still going to have some manufacturers, not of Novec 1230, but of the generic chemical, because it's needed by the industry.
Oh yeah, you need to buy, and that it's funny, the FSSA and other associations are like, hey, they're getting together now. There's like a whole task force of like, all right, what do we do? The Novec's leaving the market from 3M. We got to do something, and who's going to step in, and how does that all work with listings and design and stuff like that?
You mentioned it, like the equipment. They got all this equipment for this chemical, and then all of a
Right.
sudden, okay, now this chemical is going away. Well, you know, I have to have equipment to run it. So yeah, I need a drop-in replacement, or I have to change everything.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Yeah.
All right, this is an easier one for you, Grant.
Oh, good. Yeah, give me the easy ones.
What is your opinion on the Juicy Lucy?
You're the second guy today that's asked me about that. No, it's good. I mean, I'm a burger guy. I do like burgers. Yeah. I mean, locally, like Joe mentioned, we're right outside of St. Paul. We're pretty close. There's some, again, I'm not sponsored by anyone. I'm not going to name any names. If they would like to sponsor me, I could name them, but yeah, I do enjoy it. Yeah. I'm
guess
also a regular burger guy is fine with me too. I don't hype it up too much.
Well, I get what it is for whoever. I do a little kind of fun stuff toward the end, but Juicy Lucy is what is it? A cheese infused?
It's like infused.
Burger?
Yeah. Your burger, and then you infuse it with cheese. So when you bite into it, you get a lot of cheese coming out. It's good, but it's, to me, I don't know. It's not. Yeah, I'll take a cheeseburger too. But yeah, if you haven't had one, you should have one if you ever visit Minnesota. Is it a Minnesota thing? Is that what we're known for? Is that?
It's funny. I always Google like who's coming on, what last episode the guy was outside of London, so I did some stuff there.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this will make it fun. So I always, with St. Paul.
I recommend it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, great. Thanks, Joan and Grant for coming on today. Yeah, it's cool to talk about some of this stuff. I've been wanting to have you on for a little bit to talk about the testing. Where can we find you? You want to give some shout outs for contact info, or how do we find Dyne Fire Protection? Yeah,
I mean, our website probably being the best place to go, dyneusa.com. But we pride ourselves on being available in customer service. If you call us, you can call 800-632-2304. That as well. lab@dyneusa.com if you want to email. I mean, those are, we try to make ourselves available. If we don't know the answer, we'll point you to someone who does. But if you got a question on test results, we want to be able to, answer that call and get you right away. We know a lot of these contractors, they need that quick turnaround.
Yeah.
They want to turn around, get their end user, that building out of that answer. So they're waiting on us. So we try to be as quick as we can.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff. We actually, we're tooling with this idea. We have analytics for heads in our platform to
Mhm.
run analytics to give the contractors kind of a heads up of what's coming due for sprinkler head testing. So, that customer service to that contractor makes all the difference.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
This was episode 56 of the Fire Protection Podcast, powered by Inspect Point. I want to thank Joan and Grant from Dyne Fire Protection Labs to stop by the podcast today. Here's to a great 2024, and thanks for listening. Take care.